That way you guys can also like look it up later on, or if you miss it, ideally, it'd be great if you come to every session. I would love it. I think it's good for you. Makes it more like a classroom. If you end up just watching the recordings, it's kind of like, well, what are you getting out of it? But of course, it's up to you. And sometimes, life just happens. So I record them. Okay, cool. So day one's, well, I guess day one was yesterday. So day one of a full day, knowing that you're in the curriculum and everything like that is completed. So kind of give a quick thumbs up. Who was able to set up their environment? So like that should be like data science environment. So the Anaconda, maybe we're able to get Jupyter going. Has anyone not been able to do that yet? Just give me a thumbs down if you haven't been able to. Okay, that's all right. So hopefully that's not because there was trouble. Maybe you just didn't find the time yet. We have life going on and everything like that. So no worries there. I'm going to show a few things on there. If you are having issues, definitely reach out. Put it on the Slack. I would actually say don't directly message me, just because if I'm offline or if I'm busy with another meeting and you're sitting there for an hour, 2 hours all night waiting for someone to help you out, I just might not be there. But if you put on the Slack channel, at least in our cohort, other instructors can see it. We also have our technical coaches, who is Ben and Abinit. They're really great, and they can help you out too. So just kind of be aware that there are other people other than me too that can help you out. Maybe not bother Dara, because Dara would be like, I don't know either. But definitely just put it out there, and maybe even you guys can help each other out. Cool. All right. So we have a few things to go through today. And one thing you'll note about me is that I have so many windows that you guys will never see, but they're all over my place. I think I need to be better organized. So I'm going to share my screen. And let's see here. You think after a while I'd be able to figure this out a lot quicker, but guess not. Okay. Cool. And can you guys all see my screen? Part of it's black, so you probably can't see that part, but everyone see the whole screen? Awesome. Cool. So we are going to talk about a few things. So usually on our study groups, we'll actually do a few things like, what's it called? We'll go over the curriculum. Ideally, if you can at least skim through the section that we're going to talk about that day, that would be great, because then it means that you're at least familiar with anything that we can talk about. In an ideal world, you would be completely done with this section and probably into the next section. Of course, we don't live in the perfect world, so that's really understandable. But it's really great, because then if you ahead of time on Slack and say, hey, can we talk about this stuff? We can really dive deep into something that you are looking at. And you'll notice the curriculum section goes through quite a lot. And so if you're familiar with programming, it will feel pretty comfortable. But then as we go into deeper subjects, maybe more math-intensive subjects, maybe more deep programming subjects, it can be really overwhelming. So it's nice to use these study groups to like focus on one particular thing. Because again, I can only go through so much in an hour, right? So that's what we kind of go through. But today is kind of a little bit different. So I wanted to show you guys a few things. So first is the resources. So has everyone seen this resource page right here? Which is like a Google spreadsheet. Okay, good. I'm seeing some thumbnail down. Okay, cool. So I'll share this on Slack. Basically, these are basically a collection of different instructors. So you can see different instructors. You have Jeff, Eli, Raphael, myself. They all have put resources, whether it's recordings or whether there's certain like documents that are put together. Eli has done a great job for the first few sections, where he put together a few cheat sheets and some extra information. So that's a really great resource. This is a great way to kind of go through it, where to see all it's available. And you'll see that there's some sections here, for example, it goes all the way to mod 2, mod 3, mod 4. So I'm going to go really far into it. But note also, if I do any recordings or if I do any resources, I'll try to do my best to add them in here. Sometimes you can even remind me, say, hey, Victor, you showed us that one thing, but you never put it on the resources page. You can bother me and I'll try to do it so everyone can see it. Okay. So I'll Slack this out to everyone after this meeting. And if I don't, just remind me in case for some reason I don't do that. And then today we actually have a really specific set. This actually was created, like I said, one of the instructors, Eli. I really enjoyed it. All the stuff he puts, he has a bunch of cheat sheets basically. And so you can see here some Python cheat sheets. So how you do a lot of Python. And then as well as like some importing stuff for Pandas, which we'll get into. Let's see here what else we have. There's a bunch of stuff. NumPy, some of the stuff we have, and then there's data science stuff. So a great use of knowledge right here. It'd be great to keep this, even if you're past beginners. You know, sometimes there's just so much information. It's just nice to be able to reference it again. Okay, so I'll share this out as well. All right, but I wanted to show you guys those two things before we talk about the main thing. So you guys are basically data scientists now. Okay, yes, you are data scientists right now. It might not feel like it, but you guys have already started this path. Data science is basically, we're using tools, but it's really a mindset. It's about how you approach parts. And so I see a lot of you guys already completed this, which is awesome. Go to the first part of the curriculum and some kind of overview. And this chart I think is really great. I kind of made it bigger right here. Is that this chart I think is really sums up a lot of the processes. And we'll actually talk about ways to formalize this and the process, for example, the awesome model and everything like that. But this kind of encapsulates the main concept of data science. And note that it's a cycle. It's the data science life cycle. And it's because you don't go into one part and then you're done. You will continuously go throughout this whole circle again and again kind of deal. And it all starts off with the idea of a business understanding. And business doesn't have to necessarily be like a corporation. Business can also be, you know, for a school, a nonprofit, someone who wants to learn, like, think of like an organization that wants to know more information from their data or from other data. That's what it all starts off with. And that's a big part of data science that isn't always emphasized. We'll talk about a lot of the math and the coding parts, but really it comes down to the fact, if you're just doing this, if you are just doing the math and the coding, you know, for fun, which, you know, sometimes you do, which I enjoy, but at the end of the day, it has to be useful for someone. It has to be used for someone to do something. And that's where the business understanding comes from. And what's really great too is that a lot of people kind of feel like, oh, I have different backgrounds. I don't know if I really fit as a data scientist. My background isn't analytical. That's actually a really great thing, especially in data science, because what that allows you to do is to bring what we call domain knowledge, and you have a new insight that other people don't have. You'll see this time and time again where people just aren't familiar with the domain itself, and they'll make mistakes with the data, and they'll do all the data science stuff correctly, but not knowing what the information is actually saying. And that's actually a really important part to bring into data science. It really is, in a sense, it's data-driven, but person-led. It really is like, it has to be a person really think about what are the applications, what ways do I explore into this field? And really then we use those tools to gather more information. So anyway, that always starts off with the business understanding. And business, again, can mean organization. And then that leads us into data mining, which basically is collecting this data. You'll hear like data scientists use these terms: data mining, data scraping, data wrangling. You'll notice that they kind of feel very like, they don't appeal to, you know, it seems very like oh, data mining, it's very dirty. That's because we'll talk about dirty data. Usually it's hard work. Most of the time you'll do is between data mining, which is gathering the data. Usually we'll talk about as scraping the data, you know, data wrangling, and then also cleaning the data, basically making data so it's consistent, formatted. If you know anyone, if you can do user inputted data, so you think like whenever someone fills out a form, someone's going to fill out that form incorrectly. They're going to use numbers instead of words, or they're going to use words instead of numbers. Like, you're always going to have some form of dirty data. You're going to have missing values where maybe they try to put something in there and it's not there. But one thing I always say is that the data are data, and data being plural. There isn't a wrong data set. It's always correct in a sense. It is something. It might be not what you expected. It might not be what was expected when it was collected, but the data are data. It's valid in that sense. Okay. But this probably right here, data mining and data cleaning, will probably be, and I'm not joking, between 70 to 85% of most of the stuff you end up doing, because it's just something that's always a constant battle, trying to make sure you have the data you want. And sometimes you don't know what it is until you get into these later steps. So you'll come back and forth in this. That leads us into data exploration, which is more like we're looking at graphs, we're looking at some values, we're looking at seeing the mean, the median, you know, some descriptive statistics. This allows us to understand and summarize what our data represents. Okay, and then feature engineering, and then predictive modeling. Feature engineering, usually what we're doing now is basically trying to get the data into the right format so we can actually do some modeling, so we can actually do some prediction. And usually this is the stuff we think of like machine learning, regression, analysis. These are the kind of things that you think are like, I like to say like the really like sexy parts of data science. People like, ooh, machine learning, which is also very important, and it's also this stuff, but that's not the majority of your time. Most of your time is going to be spent in this dirty area and scraping and cleaning and scrubbing and all that stuff. So just know that there's some little bit of friction as you kind of go into this whole process. But then after you get your basically predictive modeling, and again, these are all fluid. There's not like a strict like, oh, it goes here, here, here. You might, for example, do visualization before you do predictive modeling. But now basically you do visualization to basically help present it to someone who might not be as technical, or even if someone is technical who can better understand it without maybe you spent the past 6 months going over this data, doing predictive modeling, doing all these things. And now you have to present it to someone else who doesn't have all the 6 months experience that you just did. So that's your data visualization. It's basically your summarization, whether it's to a technical person or a non-technical person. Okay, and then that kind of brings us back to once you present it to someone, it's kind of like they now have information and maybe they go deeper, maybe they stem off, maybe they say this project's maybe not completely worth our time, maybe we should sidestep it and pivot in some different way. And so you kind of go through this whole cycle over and over again. And this cycle can just be like as small as like a week. This cycle can be as long as like a year's worth of time going through over and over again. And just know that this is kind of like the basis of like what we're going for. So whenever you think like, whenever we're doing something, in the back of mind, you should always think like, how does this apply with the data science lifecycle? And hopefully you can see that connection. And if you're not really sure and you want to know why, ask, say like, where would this fit in? Like, why are we doing this? Like, because if it's not worth doing it, maybe we shouldn't be learning it. But in this case, I think we're doing a pretty good job on the curriculum. Okay. Any questions on this? I kind of went through it briefly. Curriculum also goes through quite some detail about the data science lifecycle and what data scientists do. Really what we're doing, I like to say data scientists are investigators. Like you really are trying to find like the diamond rough. We live in an age right now where there is so much available to us, but it's kind of saying, well, okay, there's this flood of information. What do you do with it? And that's where your job as a data scientist really comes in, where you get to take all this information and try to figure out the things that actually matter. So yeah, so any questions? Cool. All right. So that was kind of my little spiel, kind of introduced us into this course. And now I get to do all the fun stuff, which is right now, it's going to be showing you a bunch of things that how to do the procedures of doing the rest of the course. Section, again, this is a kind of unusual section, our study group. Usually our study groups are a little more focused in the specific material, but I'm going to go through some of that stuff. So anyway, data science life cycle, good to know. All right, and we'll keep coming back to that. All right, so I do have a little checkoff list because I want to make sure everything that is important gets marked off. So, okay, and that's why I'm seeing off to the side over here constantly. Okay, so I want to show you first of all learn.co. So hopefully, I think everyone's in learn.co. If you're not in learn.co, definitely message me as soon as possible. Okay. But everyone's on here. So if you go on like learn.co, you'll get to this page, or if you click on the up to top left right here, it'll take you to this main page. You'll see there's a bunch of information down here. Yours will look probably slightly different from mine depending on what you have going on. Usually tells you what the next lesson it is. So if you've been clicking I'm done, it tells you what the next part is, which is really nice. You'll also see the study groups that you're reserved for. If you are coming to the study group, definitely reserve it, and I'll show what that looks like in a second. But they'll show up right here, and you can see basically the study groups that are coming up or the ones that you are signed up for. Then there are things right here. Obviously, yours is going to look a little different from mine just because I have all this stuff done. But like, kind of gives you some kind of fun gamification stuff. And then the bottom right here is the stuff that I really want to care about. So right now, I have the schedule here. Right now, the data science instructors, we're actually looking to revamp this. We're going to put more information down here. But for right now, your schedule is here. And your schedule is basically all the study groups that I put in there. For example, right now we have our study group that's going on right now. And then after this, we actually have meet your cohort. So that's where you guys get to talk with Dara, basically, and you guys get to all kind of share each other's information. Unfortunately, I won't be there because I have another study group to go to. But you can kind of see where this comes from. I'll also put things like when we have projects coming in, like when project week is going on, when projects are due. You also notice that you guys have a break coming in. So you guys get a nice little soft, intro where you guys get 2 weeks and then a nice break. During this break, it doesn't mean that you don't do anything. You know, it's kind of like spring break where you're like, well, you have vacation, but maybe you have some assignments you have to kind of do. It's up to you. Big thing is don't try to burn out. Make sure you like take that time for you. If you need a vacation, you know, and that's a great time to do it. Also, this is these breaks can be a really good time to like try to, what's it called? Do any catch up if you're feeling like you're a little behind, or if you want to kind of do up a little stuff. I'll sometimes like release the curriculum beforehand in case you want to check it out. Because some people will just like, it's like, okay, I'll take that week. I'm not going to do anything, which is totally up to you, totally fine. Some people say, you know, I want to get ahead. And in that case, maybe I'll release the curriculum ahead too. But know that this is coming up 29th, and then you can see our next one won't be until July 1st. And look at that, we got our Mod 1 coming up in June, our Mod 1 project. So a little ways away, but it'll come up in time. All right, but I wanted to show you guys where to find at least the calendar, and this is where I'll try to put all the information on, okay? So this kind of brings us to study groups. So I mentioned about study groups. Our study groups are like things like this. Also things like with Dara, where we have like a group kind of thing. You can also attend other people's study groups. So there's a couple ways you can do it. You can go click here, see all study groups, or what I'll do is the top here, and I'll click study groups, I'll load for a second, and you can see a list of all the study groups that instructors or whoever put together. Sometimes we even in study groups that other, what's it called, students have put together. And so that might be something that you can join. As long as they, you know, as long as it's not restricted or anything like that, for the most part, we're pretty open. I would strongly suggest don't go to a section that obviously is in Mod 3, just because you'll be completely lost and stuff like that. But you're welcome to, for example, let's say you're like, oh, you know, maybe a month from now and you see another cohort talking about Mod 1 sections. And you're like, hey, you know, I actually want to see that again. They'd be very welcoming. They're all led by the instructors. You know, they could be led by students, but mostly by instructors. Actually, I think, was it Ali who chopped into another study group by accident? Yeah. So, you know, they're pretty nice, right? Was that Raphael?
Yeah, he was super nice. I was like, I didn't know what he was going through at first, so.
Yeah, I think that was...
I did the same thing too, Ali. I accidentally joined that one. I didn't realize FT was full-time. Now I do.
Yeah, the full-time's already like, they're on section 2 already today. So, and they'll be done with section 4 by the end of this week. So they go by really quickly. So just know, but yeah, you know, they're really nice. No one's gonna like yell at you for being in the wrong cohort or anything like that. So anyway, know this part. So for example, we have Dara's coming up here right after this class. So you can click on here and you can see you can RSVP. Right now I only see Andrew and Bardo, and actually no, oh, there's Andrew, that's right. Cool, yeah, talk to Andrew. So yeah, definitely RSVP. It helps us as the organizer figure out who's coming and stuff like that. And so it helps also put on your schedule too. It'll pop up a nice thing where it's like, hey, you have a study group coming up, and it'll pop up in the middle of what you're doing. So good to know. All right, and then I wanted to show one thing. Well, let's click on someone over here. Let's click on Bardo over here. And so you can do one thing. You can, for example, add people as friends, which is kind of nice because then you can see people who are online. So for example, when I go into the curriculum, you'll see sometimes, let's see if I have it. Okay, good. I actually have someone online over here. And so it's kind of nice because like, oh, you can see like who's available. It's kind of an alternative to Slack too. Not everyone uses Slack constantly, but you can kind of see like, hey, what section are you on or anything like that. You can kind of communicate that way. And it doesn't have to be within your cohort. It could be without any cohort. Maybe you meet up with someone who's on the same stuff, maybe a self-pacer. So just know that's available too. Okay, cool. Any questions about anything I showed you guys for how Learn works, kind of like the logistics on that? Okay, I kind of showed you a little bit, and then I won't go over this too much or anything. There's also the Ask the Question feature, which if I'm over here, you can ask a question, and you can do that specifically for that section. All right, so that's the main stuff. So you also go through the different curriculum, right? So you're going through the lessons, going next, click done when you're done. Helps us figure out, you know, if you're completed enough, and it helps you realize what you've already gone through because there's a lot of information on this one section, right? So one thing you can do though, or what you will learn to do is you can clone, basically everything's hosted on GitHub. And so GitHub is kind of like this, essentially this large repository of other code. And that's where actually all the curriculum lives. And so you can actually click on here, which is this little, it's like an octocat with a little symbol for GitHub. You click on here and it'll take you redirect you to GitHub, and that will show you actually all the code, including, which is the one that you really want to care about in this case, is our IPNB, which stands for Ipython Notebook. Just know Ipython is basically an old version, essentially, of Jupyter Notebook. It's funny enough is that when I first learned, any Python, I learned Ipython. I didn't know that was even like a thing. It wasn't, data science wasn't really a term back then, at least not aware for most people. But for the most part, it's just what we use Jupyter Notebook for. So this takes us to GitHub. So I know everyone started a GitHub thing. I think I've seen everyone who's on now has a GitHub profile. And I actually want to show you guys a few things about GitHub. And one reason why I want to show you guys this is because GitHub's kind of like your public profile. It's kind of like the first thing, like if anyone's like a recruiter or other developers or future employers, they might go look at your GitHub to basically say, hey, like, what's this person about? What have they done recently? Like, are they active, or, have they done any interesting projects? Or you could even in your resume say, hey, I did this interesting project. And if they look at your resume and say, hey, you know what, I want to check this out. Usually it'll be through GitHub and they can actually see that project and see what you've done. And what's kind of nice is that I think sometimes people think of it a little scary, being like, oh, my stuff's public. What if they say, oh, this person doesn't know how to program, or this person programmed really well? I really strongly believe that showing that you're doing something is actually a really good sign to recruiters and employers. They want to see that you've been doing things. You can get certificates, even this course, we'll get, I don't even know, we do give you a certificate. Basically, you have a completion, you can do online courses and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, what recruiters and employers really care about is like, what have you done? Or if you say you have a skill, can you prove that you have that skill? And that's where GitHub's really useful to showing that off. Okay, so I'm going to kind of show you a little bit what that looks like. So I'm going to go to my profile just to kind of show you guys in general. And it doesn't matter whose profile you go to, but I'm just showing you what mine looks like. And the main thing is you have your repos, your projects, usually your main thing is going to be your repos here. And then some extra stuff like stars, people can star your stuff or like follow you or whatever. It's kind of like a social network, but the main thing is that you're talking about your repos. And your repos are kind of like contained projects. So that's kind of like what all your stuff shows up here. So whether you fork or create a repo, that's where it'll show up here. And then this is usually like the first thing, honestly, recruiters and employers will probably see. And this is basically your contributions. And this is basically GitHub specific, where they count basically how active have you been on GitHub. And you'll notice that there's like these gray squares versus bright green squares. Basically, these represent how many things you've done in that time. And you can look over the years. Okay, so kind of pulling back the curtain of like why I'm showing you this, guys, is because recruiters will likely look at this, is that my kind of goal is like, well, if you're doing the work, I want you to make sure you get like essentially the credit for this. And there's a few things that kind of end up being a little strange when you do a fork, which I think actually what Learn kind of describes. When you do a fork, first of all, it makes a new repo. And I'll show this in a bit, but it makes a new repo. But some of the stuff as you make commits, and we'll talk about what that is in a second and throughout the course, but it doesn't show up as on here when it's on a fork. So if you do commits on a fork, it turns out it doesn't show up on here. You actually did do them, and you will see if you explore, but it's not quickly visible. So my goal for you guys is to make sure whatever you do is quickly visible and basically counts for whatever you did. So that's kind of like why I'm showing you some of this stuff. Okay, but anyway, this is kind of like their main page, and you can see these commits. We'll talk about what commits are in a second. And your repos, your repositories, basically your like contained little projects and stuff like that. And you can see when you create a new project, it counts as a contribution. If you do commits, basically you make changes on those projects, those show up too. So you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. And we could go like another like 3 days on GitHub and Git, but we're not going to do that right now. But I just want to show you this part. So this kind of comes down to what is a repo. So I'll show you, for example, like this repo. Okay, yeah, whatever. So this right here is a repo. Basically, it's like a project right here. And so you'll notice when we actually went to here and we clicked on here, we actually went to a repo. That's what this is right here. And the curriculum right now talks about forking. You would fork it from here, and that would create a new repo into your profile, essentially. Basically makes a copy of it. The problem with that is if you make commits and changes on that, repo, like for example, you fork a lab and you do changes on the lab, it doesn't show up as contributions. And I think that should count as, you guys actually doing something, right? Because you made changes on the lab. It would make sense for you to have that contributions. So I'm going to show you guys an alternative to doing that. But the main thing you have to know is that a repo exists here to allow you to, allows you to organize your code better, all right? So I'm going to show you guys what I suggest to do, which is different from the curriculum. So if you want to do it the other way, that's perfectly fine. But one of the issues when you do a fork is that you'll see here, for my profile, I have about 60-ish repos, which are basically like other little projects. Some of them are like, barely done anything. Some of them are very, much more intensive and stuff like that. For example, I have this ASL translation that I've been working for a long time. So that has a lot of things. Other ones have like 3 or 4 little commits and stuff like that. The problem is that if you fork a whole bunch of the stuff, your repos, like if you fork every lesson that's on Learn, you'll have like something around like 300 repos just from forking over the whole course. It might even be more than that, to be honest. But that kind of dilutes a lot of what you're doing if you have an interesting project. And I think that's kind of like in a sense like, oh, I don't want your stuff to get diluted. So what we can do is we can make our own repo that's kind of like just for our curriculum. Like, say, okay, I'm going to work on Flatiron stuff, and that'll be one repo, and you can put all the stuff in there and show your work. Okay, so that's what I'm going to walk through the process for. Okay, so the way we're going to do this, make sure I got my little script here to make sure I get everything I wanted to tell you guys. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is create a new repo, and this is different from forking. So to make a new repo on GitHub, I just click this plus button on the top right, new repository, and I keep saying repos, but repository is the same thing. So I create a new repo. In this case, I'm just going to call it curriculum. You could put something like Flatiron curriculum or something like that, whatever you want to put in. Basically some meaningful name. A description usually is helpful. So it's like, Flatiron school, data science curriculum. Okay, so give it some information so people know what it is. Note that you can do public or private. This is actually a relatively recent thing where GitHub was acquired by Microsoft, and basically they said you can now have, even if you have a free account, you can make any repo private, as many as you want. I strongly suggest not doing this unless there's a valid reason, like maybe you're working it for a company that you want to make sure it's secure. But even if you're doing something just for fun to play around with it, don't make it private, make it public. Show that people you're doing things and stuff like that. If you make it private, it just means that it kind of ups the level of saying what things you make public and what things you make private. And then it's going to make it feel like, oh, this isn't good enough, so I need to make it private. If you make everything public, classically, people have just done that. And it just means that you're just showing that you can do some stuff and you're just kind of messing around with experiments. So I strongly suggest always make it public, unless you have a strong reason to do it, like it's for security reasons, all right? So I'm gonna go and put this, and I'm actually gonna initialize with a README. And so what that means basically, a README is kind of like your first thing you see on GitHub to basically explain what your project is. Okay, so we can add to that, but basically it makes a file called a README file. And then I'm also gonna do a Git Ignore, and I strongly suggest doing this for Python. And what this does is that when we make our repo, it'll actually ignore certain files, for example, like cache files and things that basically don't really matter that people need to run the code, either that's you or someone else. It just kind of gets kind of messy. One thing, for example, Macs, if you have a Mac computer, they'll do a .ds store, which is a really annoying file that doesn't matter at all in the code, but it keeps showing up and you actually keep uploading it. It doesn't affect anything, but it's just kind of more annoying and kind of messy. So a Git Ignore allows you to kind of change some of those aspects, okay? So I have all this part here. I name my repo. I'm going to leave it lowercase just so it's easier to type. Doesn't really matter too much. And so I go to create a repository, and you can play around with these settings and look at what those are. And so now I have a new repository, okay, called curriculum. And you can see I have one commit. That's basically this README. And that's this README file is exactly what this stuff is. Basically just kind of describing. And we can edit this and adjust it and explain more about what to do. But I'm just kind of walking you through the main process. So now we have this repo, but now we want it on our computer so we can actually do things with it, right? So what we can do is do a clone or download. And you'll see here, if I click on this, it will download zip or open in desktop. Now, I know there's a desktop version of GitHub. I actually strongly suggest using the command line because as a data scientist, you'll probably use a lot more cloud infrastructure. And a lot of times in the cloud, you don't have a visual medium. You might not be able to use something like a visual, like what they call a GUI, a graphical user interface. You only are allowed to use command line. So I'd suggest practice using it the way I'm about to show you, but just know it's an option. So this right here basically is a reference to my curriculum, and anyone can copy this. You guys can copy this if you wanted to, right? So I go ahead and copy this guy. And now what I can do, I'm gonna open up a terminal. I'm just gonna kind of show you guys. So if you do like, Git Bash, if you have Windows, if you open up that program, if you have a Mac computer, you open up terminal, and you navigate to here. And the curriculum kind of tells you about how to walk through it. So I'm going to kind of quickly show you a few things. Just know that you'll get used to this, and you'll kind of get through the practice of a few things. So one is I'm in this terminal, and basically it's kind of like I'm inside of a folder. The computer basically runs on the terminal. It says, oh, right, here's all your stuff. So when I go in here, I'm actually inside of a folder. If I do pwd, basically that will tell me where I am in the folder. So you can see right here, it says, oh, you're in users, vGuySlinger, which is like my home, and desktop. In Mac, you can't do this in Windows, but I'm just gonna show you in Mac. I can actually open this. You don't have to really know this, but just know that it's like, oh, this is where I am. You can see that this right here, you can see all my stuff. Okay, this is basically just a folder, and that's what's going on here. So you can see pwd is basically saying, oh, you're in the desktop right here, and then we can make a new folder, okay? But in this case, we want to actually clone something. So this is how we would clone. Remember how we copied it over. So we do a git clone after you have installed Git and everything from the curriculum. Git clone, and then I can do this right here. And this basically will clone from GitHub this exact repository. So if I click this now, it'll download it from online. In this case, there's not very much in there. And you'll now see I have now a folder in here, right? It made a new folder. In fact, you can see a README file. And then if you really wanted to, you could see there's actually a .git ignore, but it's hidden in Mac. So that's why it doesn't show up here. So now I can actually see the files. Like, what if I want to see the files on the terminal? Well, I can do ls, and ls will list the files. In this case, you can see that their curriculum is there. That's the only thing in there. If I want to change the directory, change it to a folder, navigate into it, I do a cd into the curriculum. So now I change the directory into the curriculum. So now I can actually be in here. If I do pwd, you actually see that I'm now inside that folder. That's what's going on here. I'm inside the curriculum folder. Okay. And now if I do ls again, you can see a list of files, and you can see, oh, there's my readme.md. Okay. And then note that there's some things called flags that you can do. For example, this will list the hidden files. So for example, there's a .git and a .git ignore. That was the .git ignore that we talked about. So it ignores all that junk that we don't care about. Okay, so that's kind of like a cloning thing. But now it's like, okay, cool, we cloned it, but what if I want to add stuff to it? All right, so this is where I'm differing a lot from the curriculum. So what I would do, if I were you guys, so it shows up well on my GitHub profile and everything. Let's say I come across, the data science process. I'm like, cool, I want to go ahead and clone that, right? The curriculum says you click on the GitHub guy, it takes you to this page right here, and then you would click fork. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just some of the things that I talked about. What you can do instead is you can click here, clone, and I copy it the same way. So I copy this and paste this, basically this line for the repo. Okay, so I copy this, and then what I can do, I can go back to my terminal, right? And then I can do is do a git. I'm inside the curriculum repo, okay? So then I can do a git clone. Well, okay, sorry, I'm going to slow down a little bit. So I want to kind of organize some stuff. I'm kind of thinking ahead. So I want to make a new folder of like basically mod 1, and I'll have mod 2, and then section 1, section 2. That way to keep it a little more organized. So what I could have done is I go on here in my curriculum folder. I can make a new folder called mod 1, all right? Makes sense. And you can see now if I do an ls, you'll see it has mod 1 there. Cool. And it's like, okay, what if I want to make a new folder in there? I could go open this guy on Finder, make a new folder, but I'm going to show you an alternative way. So one thing we can do is we can actually make a directory. So mkdir, so make a folder, make a directory. And then I give it a path name, basically the name of the folder. So if it was just I wanted to make, let's say, section 1, this will actually create, I'll just show an example. This is like a test folder. And you'll see it makes a test folder right out here. It's like, okay, but let's say I want instead, I want to make a directory inside of mod 1. I could either change my directory into mod1, make a directory in there, or I could do mod1 /, which is like, okay, make a directory for mod1, which already exists, /, and then I'll call it section 01. Okay, so then I have that in there. And now you'll actually see on my computer here, section 01's in there. So now I'm going to go ahead and change my directory into that mod1 section 01. And you can see that I'm going to clear it out so it's a little easier to see. And now you can see my PWD shows me where I am. I can see that I'm inside this mod1 section 01. Okay, and you can see right now on my Finder, there's nothing in there, right? And of course, this test folder, which I'm just going to delete because I was just messing around. Okay, so now I can actually do my Git clone. So now I'm inside section 01, that folder. I can do a Git clone. And remember, I copied it from before. So I'm going to paste, oops, see, I didn't copy that, sorry. So I have to redo that. So I do a Git clone. And I have to make sure I get the repo or the URL for the repo right here. I do a Git clone, pasting it here. And I can clone that whole directory, that whole repo into my mod1 section 01. So if I do this now, you'll see a clone it through, and you'll actually see now that it's actually in here. So you see mod1 section 01, and I actually have this repo in here with all the information. So this is essentially exactly what you're doing with clone, or sorry, with fork, but instead we're doing it manually. The only thing about this, which is the biggest part where I'm like, you know, this is the part you should really give credit to it. And this goes not just for like using learn, but you know, if you ever clone someone else's stuff, you should probably reference saying, hey, I found it from this part. So one thing you could do, for example, is edit your, let's see here. I'm just going to edit with this something simple, so it's not too fancy. Edit your README, and I can say something like, you know, mod1 section 01. Cloned repos, just so people know where it came from. And I'll put like, oh, okay, first one, and I'll just put the list, the URL there. So you can kind of see, oh, okay, that way someone can see that and see what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and now that will change my README. So cool. That means inside here now, I actually have a new folder in here. I have my READMEs updated, and I also have a section 01 and then all this info in here. But you'll notice if I go back to my GitHub, nothing's changed. It looks the same. Nothing, it's just a README and a Git Ignore. So what we have to do, we basically have to connect it into GitHub and say, hey, we made these changes, reflect these changes. And so this is what we call a commit. And so this process is going to be over and over again called basically Git Add, Git Commit, Git Push. You'll see this over and over again. Just know basically that what we're doing is when we use Git, it's really a versioning tool, which means we're talking about what changes did we do. So what we can do, we have some extra commands. So I saw like Git Clone earlier, right? And it did some extra stuff. We can also do, while we're inside this directory, we can do Git Status. And Git Status, that basically will tell us, hey, what's changed so far? And you'll see when I do Git Status, it gives me a bunch of information. We can talk more about this. There's a lot of terminology in Git and GitHub. Basically, it's saying, hey, you made some changes. For example, you modified that README file. And then also, it looks like you have some new files in here. Okay, so I'm actually going to step up one level. So I'll actually, remember I'm in section 01 right now. I want to move one step above that. So I'm actually going to go CD above, and then this will actually make me into mod1. I'm going to go CD one more above. And so note that CD double dot means just go up a level. So you can imagine if I'm going in the folder, you're just going up the parent folder, and then CD dot dot is up one folder again. Okay. So now I should be at the curriculum, so you can see that. What's going on right here. And then I'm going to clear this so you guys can see it better. I'll do Git Status, and you'll see here now again the modified README, and then there's that pesky.ds store that I don't want to save. We'll talk about how to do that later. And then there's the mod1 folder. Inside in that mod1 folder is all that extra changes. So I'm actually going to do something called adding it. So now I can do Git Add, and I'm going to add README. Okay. So I can do Git Add README, and this moves it what we call into the staging area. Basically, like Git Status shows us what changes we made, whether we modified something, whether we deleted something, whether we have something completely new that's never been there. Git Status shows us what has changed, basically. So Git Add now moves these changes into what we call the staging area. Basically, oh, we made these changes. We're ready to commit to these changes. So Git Add will say, oh, you changed README. So I'm going to add that into my list of changes. So I do git add readme.md. And now if I do a git status, you actually see that it has a slightly different message. It still shows us some untracked files, which we'll get to in a second. But you'll see here now, modified, it actually shows, hey, it's in green. And in fact, it has this thing called changes to be committed. So basically it's saying, hey, you made these changes. All right, these are the changes you want to commit to. And that's kind of like commit me, like, oh, I'm making a commitment on these changes. That's kind of the terminology. So now I'm saying, okay, cool. These files, I changed the README. I'm going to commit to this. I'm going to commit this change. So I do a git commit. Okay. And this will come through time. I know it's a lot of like terminology, but your git commit basically saying, oh, I'm committing to this change right here, this stuff in green. So I do a git commit, and then we have to always add in a message. So if you do a git commit like this and press enter, a window will pop up and say, hey, enter a message, and you have to save it and do that. But if we're going to do a very small message, I can just do a -m, which says, all right, the next thing that we're going to do is a message. And I'll put in my message in here. In this case, I'll say added credit to Learn Co. Okay. Or say for new repo. Okay. So basically, it's like, okay, I'm describing what I changed. So we basically, a couple things we did. We basically did our git add, moved our stuff to the staging area, and said, all right, these are changes that we made. And then we do a git commit. We're committing those changes, and we're adding a message to it. So now if I press enter here, you'll see, cool, added credit to Learn repo, one file change, 4 insertions. Now if I do git status, you'll see that it's actually gone here. There's nothing here. And that's because we made those changes. We made that change. Now, you'll notice though, even though I made that change, if I go back to GitHub and do a refresh, it still hasn't changed. Nothing's changed. And that's because GitHub doesn't know that we made those changes yet. So I did a git add, a git commit, and now I have to do something called a git push. And that push pushes my stuff onto GitHub. I'm pushing my changes to GitHub. So I do a git push. And since we cloned it from GitHub, this actually makes it really easy. There's other options you could do, but we're just going to do git push. I do a git push, and I'm pushing it through online to GitHub, my changes that are happening. And you'll see right now it's going through. And you'll see that there's some success message right here. If it didn't go through, it'll give me a different message. And now if I do a refresh, you'll see my README here has updated. You can see right here, it's changed. So that's kind of how you can kind of connect back and forth with GitHub, all right? But you notice that we still didn't add in that folder structure, right? Which is kind of like, we want to put that part in there. So, oh, and one other thing too, you can see my commits have gone up here. And if I actually go to here, you'll actually see my list of commits, my first initial commit, which I basically when I first created the thing, but then also added credit to Learn Co for new repo. My list of commits are there still. So you can kind of like follow through the progression of like, you know, what you've been doing, okay? But now let's go ahead and add our mod 1, right? So someone want to help me out here? What's the first command do you think I would put in? And I'll clear this out a little bit. And no wrong answers, no shame in whatever you say. We're all learning. I'll give you a hint, it starts with git.
Wait, what were you saying that you were going to do right now?
Yeah, so I want to go ahead and add this mod 1 to my changes. Like I made a change in mod 1, and I want to add this eventually to GitHub. So what's my first step you might try doing?
So git add.
Okay, git add. So git add, and do I put anything else there?
I'm sure you do. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So git add is a good one. So we actually want to add what are we adding? We're adding mod 1, right? So I can do a git add mod 1. You also could have done git status first just to double check like what has changed so far. And you can see, oh, okay, I have this mod 1. I want to save this. .ds store, that stinking ds store, I don't want that in there because it doesn't really matter. So mod 1 is the actual thing I want to change. So git add was exactly right, Andrew. Mod, and then I'm just adding mod 1. So basically, if I did git add like this, just to kind of show you, it'll say, hey, you didn't tell me what to add. Like, what do you want to do? So I have to go, oh, git add mod 1. Okay, so I'm like, okay, I'm adding everything that's in mod 1, including mod 1 to the folder. So we do this. Ooh, a lot of stuff going on. So, oh, I have an embedded repository. Sorry, guys. Sorry, I just realized there's one thing I didn't show you guys. So, one complication is besides everything else you're doing. So the problem is because I cloned it, actually within this guy, I have a special file called a .git, and I actually want to get rid of this .git because basically it's no longer connected to that part. So what I can do is I can do, be careful with this, but remove -rf.git, and I'm in the specific part here. Be careful with this. I think we might change this. I might write a little thing to say how to do this, but basically it removes this section. And now if I go back to the beginning, which should have worked before, if I do a git add mod1, you actually see now it added through with no warning. So if I do git status, you can see now, oh cool, I have all these new changes. All right, I have a new mod1, I have a mod1, these stores. We'll get rid of those eventually. But the main thing is that I have this new mod1 section 01, this section with all the stuff inside of it. Okay. So now I can do a git commit, right? So I'm committing these changes. I'm in the staging area, make the commit, and I'm going to commit these changes with a message, and I'll just give it some random little message. I'll say new repo. Okay. So I'll do a git commit with that message, new repo. And now if I do a git status, you'll see that there is no change here going through. Okay. And then I can now do a git push, because remember, if I go here now, you'll see there's no changes still, right? So if I do a git push, you'll actually see going through. And now it should be pushed onto GitHub, and you can see my new mod1 here. Okay. So now, and along with the section 1, and then the DS store here. So I just wanted to show you guys this process of going through. I honestly, it's a lot to take in. So to be perfectly frank, if you were like, well, like, which I'm pretty sure most people feel this way, and let's be honest, it's a lot to take in. If you feel really overwhelmed, I'm going to write something a little bit more clean for kind of show you guys how to do that. But for now, you can keep forking. But one thing I wanted to show you guys is like, oh, this is how you can kind of keep things nice and clean, because now we only have one repo versus if we make many, 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 many repos over and over again. Okay, cool. How you guys feeling? Thumbs up, sideways, thumbs down, be like, I don't understand what's going on. And no shame if you're feeling like, I don't know what's going on, because it's a lot. I see a lot of sideways thumbs. That's good. And I always like to say, like, even when we're doing the curriculum and we're walking through, when you guys have a sideways thumb, I'm like, that's a good thing, because it means that you're learning. You know, like, there's still stuff to learn, and there's a lot to learn, and you can't do it all within 1 hour. But I just wanted to show you guys that whole process of going through. So my suggestion for now is that keep doing the forking thing. Maybe like follow basically what the curriculum does. And the fork, basically, you click on this guy right here, and you'll make a new repo, okay? And that one's relatively simple. And then in the future, we'll talk about how to do this more advanced part and basically see how to, what's it called? See how to make your repos basically more condensed. Because that's like my thing. One thing is to make it condensed so it's easier to find. But two, also, when you make changes now into your, what's it called? In your repos, or sorry, in your cloned repos, in your forked repos, it'll show us contributions. Otherwise, you'll only get contributions for forking it. Okay, cool. So I wanted to show you guys that. And then last thing before we head out, then I want to show you guys how to use Jupyter Notebook. So I think, first of all, thumbs up who's already gotten their Jupyter Notebook running, or they've used Jupyter Notebook so far. So thumbs up, thumbs down if you haven't gotten to it yet. And no shame in giving thumbs down. Okay, cool. I almost feel like thumbs down seems so negative. I feel like I should do something else, but oh well. All right, so I'll show you a little bit what Jupyter Notebook looks like. So just know that the Learn curriculum, oh, see, I have another study group coming up. The Learn curriculum actually goes through this, I think, in setting up your professional data science environment. So just know that it goes to this whole part for both Windows and Mac. Everyone has either a Mac or a Windows. No one has anything special. No Linux computers. Okay, cool. So just know that this goes through the whole process. So the idea is like you've gone through all this part, but I'm going to show you what this will look like. So one way you do this, you open up your terminal. If you're in a Mac computer, you would open up terminal. If you're on Windows, you would do git bash. You could also open up directly from Anaconda, but I'm showing you Windows. So the first thing you need to do is make sure you open up your virtual environment. And that basically is like a way to make sure we have all our certain packages nice and neat. Basically, you can kind of think of it like a new note, like a little space like in your house. It's kind of like, oh, it's your office. It's like this is your learn environment office. And that way you can keep that nice and neat and do other stuff outside without affecting this little guy. And that's what our environment really is, our virtual environment. So to do that on the computer, we do source, activate, and then we're going to do the learn environment. So if you follow the whole procedure, you'll have this in here. And what this will do, basically, it'll say activate the learn environment. Basically, say, okay, now everything we'll do in here, it's in the learn environment. So I click on this, and you'll see now, especially if you have Windows, Mac, it'll show up this way. I think Windows is the same thing for git bash. You'll see it says learn environment. So that's why you know you're in there. And notice that every time I do something, it'll say learn environment. So now what I can do, I can type Jupyter Notebook. Okay. And when I do Jupyter Notebook, what this will do, it'll basically launch saying, these are commands. Basically, all right, Jupyter, launch a notebook. And it'll open up on my computer, and you'll see it kind of take a second. It'll do this URL. Note that you could copy this URL directly. Okay? You could copy and paste that. That's your specialty. But normally, it'll just open up automatically, basically this directory of stuff. And so now we have all these things in here. And I'm kind of just showing you quickly. This is Jupyter Notebook itself. And so we can actually see what things are running in here. We can see if there's anything going through. We can even open up a new terminal. But in this case, I'm going to show you guys making a new notebook. Normally, you would already have a notebook, and you would basically just click it on here. But I want to show you what that would look like. We'll make a new one. So this is our new notebook. I'm just going to save it just so you can see. So you can see there's a new notebook, and it's always got a .ipnb. That's how you know it's a notebook. So you click on this guy, or if you make a new one, I clicked on it, you have it here. And this is actually how you can run code. So now you guys have all done Python, I think for the pre-course and everything like that, at least. So you can see, for example, I can do like a print one, and you can say, oh, print something. You can say print, hello. Okay. So this is basically, I can run this stuff, I can save it, and this is how Jupyter Notebook kind of runs through. We can talk more about how to use it, but I think it's better just to kind of explore and kind of play around with it. Note there's a couple of ways you can interact with Jupyter Notebooks. You can do code like this, or you can even have, if I change this to a markdown, you can actually make nice little settings. For example, this is a heading. I can do something like a list. You can see right here very quickly. So to run these parts, you just basically would click this run, or if you just do Shift-Enter, and that will run that section, or Control-Enter will just run it over and over again. You can see that number going up and up and up. Okay. Again, goes through the curriculum, but I kind of want to just show you guys at least what it looks like. And then if you want to rename a file, you can click up here and rename it to, I don't know, fast. Okay, cool. All right, a lot I just showed you, so don't feel like you're like, oh, I should know all of this right now, master at it. Definitely go through the curriculum. If you come into problems though, as you're going through it, ask questions on Ask a Question, or going through Slack, the best thing to do is just really to put it out for everyone to see. Not just me. It's like sometimes people will just direct message me, which is perfectly fine if that's what you want to do. But I'd strongly suggest, ask in the Slack channel itself, because then everyone can, kind of help you out. And then also, I think it kind of, first of all, I think get used to not knowing things sometimes, because even what professional data scientists, they'll tell you. I think there was just something, I didn't share about this. There was a conference that had come out today, and I was watching part of it. And there's a professional, a PhD, who's he's got to be at least in his 50s now. And he was talking about it, and he was saying even he suffers from imposter syndrome. I don't know if you guys know what imposter syndrome is, but imposter syndrome basically is like you kind of have this feeling, I'm not really good enough. Like sure, they call me a data scientist, but I'm not really. I'm just learning everything. He even feels that way at times because there's always so much to learn. And I think one way to get past that is really just being open, saying, hey, I have knowledge gaps, like, is it okay, someone to help me out? And what's nice about the data science community is that they're very helpful. And what's even nice now is that you guys now have 10 other experts basically along you who are doing the same exact stuff, and you guys are now can all ask each other. So definitely use that as your resource. Cool. And of course, I'm here around to help out along with any other instructors. Cool. All right, so I'll stop sharing my screen. And then do you guys have any questions, anything that you guys like to ask or anything like that?
So where do we find the recorded videos?
Oh, what was that? Videos?
Where do we find the recorded videos? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll Slack it out. Usually I'll put it in the student resources if I find it actually informative. But I'll Slack you guys out first usually before I put it in resources. Note, however, I did forget about this. Slack, after 1 week, the messages that are there, including direct messages, those disappear. So just know that if there's something that comes up, you're like, ooh, that's really important, I want to save that. Make sure you save it, bookmark it, download it, whatever you need to do. And of course, I think what I've been doing is I've just been putting the videos through my, basically through my YouTube channel, and then they're all public, so that way you can see everything. So that way, if you don't have the specific link, if you remember how to get to that channel specifically, you can at least check it from there. And of course, I'll try to put it in the student resources, and I'll make sure to Slack out that info. Cool. All right. Anything else you guys would like to know?
Quick question, Victor.
Yeah.
Stupid question.
No.
Is there I mean, what's the point of forking the lessons actually? So what's the point of, and should we fork all the lessons or just the labs, or So
it's up to you. One reason why you might want to fork it is you can have it offline on your own computer. If, for example, you're offline, you're traveling, or if for some reason the internet goes down, you can still do stuff if you have it forked onto your local computer, which involves forking on GitHub and then cloning it like the curriculum shows. The other thing you can do too is that you can do a lot of stuff within the learn.co website, like doing those notebooks, but that stuff will get erased. So it doesn't save automatically on the website. So if for example, if you work on the lab, which might take you, maybe a couple hours, maybe even an hour, if for some reason the page reloads, you just lost all your work. So that might be a good reason to actually fork it or clone it, and then work on there on your local machine. And plus, to be honest, you're going to be doing a lot of this stuff on your own local machine as a professional. So it's a good way to practice too, of how to use the Jupyter Notebook and just getting into that practice. Cool. Good question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Anything else, guys?
Where are the student resources?
Yeah, it's on a link. I'll send it out right now on Slack. But it's, oops, I can pull this up. Sorry, guys. Oh, and I realize we're over too, which I know you guys have stuff going on. Is there any other questions? I'm sending on Slack right now. And Andrew, make sure you get on Slack. Message me if you're having issues with that. Any other quick questions before I have to leave? And then you guys have your study group with meet your classmates. You guys get to all talk to each other. Cool. All right, guys. All right. Just know next study group will be on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So if it doesn't work out, let me know. Just message me and we'll figure it out. Also, I think I sent everyone info on one-on-ones. If you haven't gotten that, just message me out and I'll help you out. I think Andrew, I haven't gotten to you, so we'll talk.
Right. Okay.
Cool. All right, guys. So with that then, take care. I'll be in Slack and I'll see you guys through video on Thursday. All right, take care.
Thanks.